A bit of a misunderstanding. I figured I ought to share the story from the perspective of the accidental creeper. I'll preface it by giving a quick description of myself. I'm about 6'2", lanky, long-haired, and ginger. I run semi-frequently, but I don't like getting up early, nor do I like running when it's hot. So, I usually end up running late at night. I also happen to look like an utter madman while I run. Usually I'll throw on some sweatpants and shitty old t-shirt, and my usually perfectly coiffed ginger mane morphs into a sort of sweaty, sketchy mullet. I also turn a deep, deep shade of red. This particular night, it just so happens I was running a bit later than usual, around 1-ish. I have odd sleeping patterns. I've been trying to push myself a little further, so after passing my usual route, I decided to take the long way back to my house down a couple of meandering residential streets. One such street, I started cramping really badly and slowed to a walk for a bit. Just as my breathing came back to a regular rate, a woman in maybe her late 50s turned from another street onto the same street as me, about 25 meters away. I'm not really paying much attention, but I see her cross the street shooting furtive looks in my direction. As she reaches the other side, I finish counting and begin running again, and, without thinking, cross the street so I can turn from there back towards my house. She immediately jumps into some kind of defense stance, yelling something like, "What the fuck, get away!" I realized I must have done something wrong, and she's mistaken me for some kind of rake. I tried to think of a way to explain the misunderstanding and express the humor and the ridiculousness of the situation. Unfortunately, this comes out as a sort of semi-maniacal, hoarse laugh. She appeared to be reaching into her handbag. At this point, I decided to cut my losses and ran in the other direction, taking a different route home. He pretended to be my dog. Before I start, here's a bit of context to my story. My husband and I lived in a small 2-floor house with 2 main entrances, one along the front and the other on the other side of the house, which opens up into the laundry room. When we're too busy or it's too late to walk our dog, we hook his collar onto a long line that's attached to one of the pipes on the corner of our house, so he can use the bathroom. We used to do this from the door in our laundry room, but we noticed the large step from the door to the ground had been taking a toll on his hips. As a result, we started letting him through the front door instead, since the porch is much closer to the ground. And on this particular night, I was home alone with my dog, and it was around midnight, when I decided to let him outside one last time before going to bed. I hook him up to his line, close the door and lock it, before heading into the kitchen to put away the dishes. This was pretty routine. Even if he used the bathroom quickly, he liked to walk around along the front and side of the house for a few minutes before coming back inside. As I'm putting away the dishes, I hear a scratch on the door, which is how my dog signals he wants to come inside, so I head over to let him back in. Since I've watched way too many scary movies, I always look through the door's peephole before opening the door. Out of habit, I look to check that my dog is in front of the door. Instead, I see a man staring very intently at the door handle. I freeze with my hand on the door handle. I don't know how much time went by, but then I heard another scratch, this one louder than the last. This kind of wakes me up from my initial shock, and I run to grab my cell phone. I call my husband and tell him what's happening. He was very confused. I probably wasn't explaining the situation very well, but says that he's heading home. This is when I realize my dog is still outside with this person. I head back to the front door trying to make as little noise as possible to check whether the stranger is still there. Just like before, he's standing there, head bowed looking at the doorknob. I tiptoe over to the laundry room and slowly open the door as quietly as possible. I can't see my dog anywhere and the side of my house is covered in gravel. I knew I couldn't step outside without making a lot of noise. With my heart still pounding in my chest, I go to the front door to keep an eye on a stranger and to get a better look at him. I considered calling the police, but I didn't feel like they would take me seriously since all this man was doing was standing in front of my house. I tried taking a picture of him with my cell phone, but my camera was only able to take pictures of the people and not the images behind the glass. All of a sudden, the man looks up directly at me. I swear he knew I was there. He glares at me, then opens his mouth to show this taunting, malicious grin. He stood there that way for a few seconds, and with that, he slowly turned around and starts to walk down the street. I stay in the same place, almost expecting him to run back and start pounding on the door. Luckily, my husband got back after a few minutes, and long story short, he convinced me to call the police, and we went out looking for our dog. It turns out this man had kept the end of the line connected to the pipe, and our dog decided this was a good time for him to explore my neighbor's backyard, which was where we found him. It's been 3 years since this happened. We've since moved to a new house for unrelated reasons, and the police weren't able to come up with any suspects. Though ever since then, we take our dog on very long walks before the sun goes down. My roommates aren't laughing at me anymore. About 5 months ago, a friend of mine got expelled from his program because of bad marks. He was only halfway through his lease, and he didn't see a point of staying in the city since he was only here for school. He told me that if I wanted to take over his lease as a subletter, he would only charge me half of the rent, which I thought was a pretty sweet deal. So naturally, although I am from this town, I thought it was time to leave my parents' place. I had already graduated, and although I had been looking for a new job for a while, I still felt like I couldn't miss out on the opportunity. So, I took over his lease and moved into his place. The house itself was actually pretty nice. It's 3 floors including the basement, and it's located near the university of my town, which is not a very safe area overall, but I spent a lot of my university years here and never felt unsafe. The room in the basement is pretty small but cozy, and the only other room down here is a girl who is currently a student, and she's pretty quiet. Actually, all the girls living here are pretty good roommates. I wasn't thrilled about living with 3 girls, but now I don't see why I would have thought it was an issue. They're all pretty great and a good time. I'm the only one in this house who's not a student, and also the only one who is originally from this town. The other roommates are all actually from cities that are about an hour or 2 away at most, so unless there's something special going on, they all go home on weekends. My friend who got expelled also lives 2 hours away, so he would always go home for the weekend as well. One thing I forgot to mention, which is pretty crucial to the story, is that the house actually has 5 rooms, but right when they all moved into the new place together, one of the girls had a seizure on her bed and passed away. This was pretty upsetting for everyone, and the landlord told them not to worry about finding anyone else. Their rent never went up or anything, and the room was left vacant. According to the landlord, he just found it insensitive to try and find someone because he didn't want to turn someone's death into a financial inconvenience for him. So after the girl's death, the parents came and took her belongings out of the room, and it just remained empty since then. I actually never looked in there because it would just remain locked, and I don't really have much curiosity to see the room. It is on the 2nd floor, and I never go up there, so I never paid any attention to it. The first weekend I spent there was pretty uneventful. I remember that I spent one night at my boyfriend's place, and then the next night he slept over after he went out drinking at one of the college bars near the place. We were pretty wasted, so we passed out as soon as we got home. The next weekend, I was at home in my new room and I couldn't sleep, so I decided to read a little bit. I was really enjoying the quietness of this new house, since the girls weren't home at all. I come from a Latino family, so this quiet and serene environment was pretty rare. I thought that I heard a few noises upstairs, so I figured that one of the girls had probably decided to stay the weekend at the house, or she was just getting last minute things ready before heading home. I really didn't think much of this thing. I wasn't very close with the roommates, so I didn't even bother asking them if any of them had stayed home. I just felt like it was none of my business. The girl in the basement was for sure gone for the weekend, because she apparently sleeps with her door locked and keeps it open when she's not home. One weekend that same month, I woke up to pee, and I could hear a toilet flushing upstairs, which was kind of weird, since I knew that none of the girls were home. I was going to go check it out, but in my tired state, I was just too lazy and just didn't care enough. It's funny, horror movies in general are supposed to make you paranoid. But the biggest lesson I got was that there's always a rational explanation for things. And I guess I was right. This would prove to be my biggest mistake, because for a couple months I was always brushing things off, and ironically, creating irrational explanations to rationalize what I thought were irrational thoughts. Get it? For example, I heard creaking coming from the second floor, and figured one of the girls must have forgotten something, and decided to come by to pick it up. The girl must have driven 2 hours down, and 2 hours back to her town in the middle of the night to pick something up. One Saturday, I woke up to get some water, and I noticed that the roommate in the basement was gone. Her door was open, and her car was not in the driveway. There weren't any cars in the driveway, but I should mention that one of the girls doesn't drive. A couple hours later, I woke up because I heard steps coming down into the basement. At this point, I yelled at the girl's name who doesn't drive, because she's the only one who could have been in the house. I didn't get a reply, and just heard the steps going back upstairs. At this point, I started getting uneasy about being home on weekends, so I decided to just spend them at my boyfriend's house. One of the girls made a house Facebook page, which was supposed to address any issues like washing dishes or leaving messes, but it remained pretty inactive since everyone seemed to get along. I posted on there that some creepy stuff was happening on weekends and asked them if they could start letting me know if they'd be home or for the night or not. They seriously thought I was joking around. The replies were not receptive at all and consisted of "Lamau" or "Oh my god, you're so funny." Even my boyfriend agreed that I was being paranoid, because he too believed that everything has a rational and perfect explanation. The thing is, when you say that everything has an explanation, you're only invalidating paranormal explanations or ghostly activity, which is not what I was implying at all. I have never believed in ghosts or spirits or any of that jazz, and I never claimed so when I spoke to my roommates or to my boyfriend. They kept on saying that the house was old and made noises. But I know the difference between old house noises and someone walking down the stairs and back up the stairs. Fortunately, my roommates did start posting things on the Facebook page to let me know when they'd be gone. It was always to the effect of, "Hey, LOL, I won't be home this weekend, so don't worry about the ghosts." One weekend, they all let me know that they would not be home, and my boyfriend was on the midnight shift, so I had to spend the night on my own. My boyfriend called me on his break, and while I was on the phone with him, I heard noises on the main floor. I told him I was going to check it out, and he told me to go ahead because the motherfucker still thought I was being paranoid. As I said this, I heard the footsteps going back up to the second floor. Once I got onto the main floor, there was nobody in the kitchen, and all the doors in the house were locked. I was extremely paranoid and did not feel safe. My boyfriend calmed me down and convinced me that everything was okay. So I never went to the second floor, and it's probably best that I stayed on the main floor. After that weekend, I told my roommates in all seriousness that I was convinced that someone had been inside our house at some point that night. I told them what I heard, and the fucking bitches still claim that it was the old house making noises. My boyfriend was almost permanently on midnights, so I did what I never wanted to do and started spending weekends at my parents' place. The girls still posted on the page whether or not they'd be leaving the house or not, and I decided that I should do the same. So I started posting when I was and was not sleeping at the house. One Friday night, the Facebook page looked something like this. Roommate 1, not sleeping at home. Roommate 2, not sleeping at home. Roommate 3, staying home because of midterm exams. Me, I'm staying at my parents' place. The next morning, I received a frantic text from one of my roommates saying that the roommate with the midterm exams had been attacked. Apparently, she was in her room studying and heard a noise right outside of her bedroom. When she went to inspect it, she was greeted by a man walking out of the dead girl's room. I later found out more details about the whole thing from the roommate who was attacked. The man looked rough, greasy hair, and just a dirty, dirty face. When they made eye contact, he held his finger up to his mouth and uttered a shh while smiling. The nail on his finger was long, and his beard was apparently really straggly and uneven, like it only grew on certain parts of his face. She screamed out of instinct, even though she knew there was nobody in the house. He lunged at her as she tried to shut the door, and she wasn't beaten up too badly. He just growled and told her to shut her mouth and said something like, "I'm not gonna rape you, you just shut your mouth." He beat her, but not completely unconscious. And then when he walked out of her room, he went downstairs and walked out the front door. So he left the dead girl's room unlocked. My roommate locked herself in her room and called the police, who were there immediately. What's creepy about the whole thing is that when they inspected the dead girl's room, they kept asking for clarification. So nobody has lived in this room for how long? Nobody has been renting this room, right? Did the parents take everything after the girl passed away? The guy had a really sweet setup actually, and had brought his own small mattress to put over the bed frame. Obviously the mattress was too small for the bed frame. He left most of his stuff because he probably didn't expect a confrontation that night. I don't think he knew she would be there that night because she never was. It probably sucked for him when I moved in because before me, the bastard had the whole house to himself 2 days a week. The police did ask me quite a lot of questions and were very interested in hearing my statement, especially about hearing footsteps at night. My 3 roommates and my friend are now convinced that maybe the girl didn't die the way they said she did, and maybe he murdered her. But I think the autopsy would have been able to distinguish a murder from a seizure. In their defense, the whole thing is really creepy. We're not really sure how long the guy had been living there, but it's very likely that it had been at least a few months. The theory is that the guy has been climbing in through the window, so it's possible that he was even there at times when all of us were there. The police are really interested in talking to the landlord because they want to know how the man found out about the vacant room. The landlord is a pretty decent guy, so I don't know if there's anything going on there. I don't even feel a "I told you so" attitude from this whole thing. I think that I am just glad that the girl is okay, because she seemed pretty shaken up. I just wish people were more willing to listen to me when I told them that I thought somebody was coming into our home. I even said it might be a squatter, which everyone laughed at. This happened very recently, so it might be a while before an update. As of now, the man has not been found, but the police remain optimistic about finding him, whatever that means. This has been a pretty terrible month for me, and I don't know if I want to be at this house anymore. I don't have much left on the lease, and I recently lost my job, so it might be best for me to leave the place now. I doubt the guy will come back because all of his stuff has been taken out, but I still find it creepy in this house. I definitely don't spend weekends here anymore.